Good afternoon, everyone. It's now 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, and you have joined the 2024 Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Response Program Solicitation webinar. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to sign on, and then we'll be starting in just a couple of minutes, so please stand by. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today's 2024 Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Response Program Solicitation webinar. We're glad to have you here. My name is Allison Upton, and I'm a Deputy Program Director at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. I'll be facilitating today's webinar, which is hosted by the U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. Next slide. So we have a great group of panelists today I'd like to introduce you to. To begin with, we have Brooke Mount. Dr. Mount is a seasoned professional with a wealth of experience in the fields of behavioral health and criminal justice matters. Currently, she holds the position of Senior Policy Advisor within the Justice and Behavioral Health Policy Team at the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA for short. Dr. Mount oversees the Justice and Mental Health portfolio, which includes the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, or JMHCP, and the Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Response Program. She collaborates with national partners to assist states, local government, and behavioral health organizations to better understand the relationship between the criminal justice system and mental health population, and to create policy and programming that meets the needs of municipalities and the citizens they serve. Dr. Mount is a recognized subject matter expert who holds licensure as a licensed professional counselor in the District of Columbia. Before joining the Bureau of Justice Assistance, she dedicated a decade of her career to the Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency, and as the clinical director of a distinguished private psychology practice, providing court-ordered forensic evaluations and specialized counseling services. We're also joined today by Nikisha Love. Ms. Love has been with the Department of Justice Office of Justice Program since 2008, and she is a grants management specialist for the Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA. In this role, Ms. Love manages and provides guidance in the administration of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, JMHCP grant funding, Adult Drug Court grant funding, and Justice Assistance Grant, or JAG, grant funding. Ms. Love has a strong financial background and has been managing formula and discretionary grant programs for over 20 years. She first started administering grants with the Department of Health and Human Services in the Office of Grants Management as a grants management specialist, where she managed over 300 grants for the Office of Community Services and served as a lead specialist for the Assets for Individual Development Accounts grant-funded program and for the Compassion Capital Fund grants. We'd like to also welcome Tammy Lovell. Ms. Lovell has been with the Department of Justice Office of Justice Program since 2020. She is a grants management specialist for the Bureau of Justice Assistance Office. In this role, she manages and provides guidance in the administration of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, JMHCP grant funding. for collaborative crisis response and intervention grant funding, for JAG grant funding, for Justice for All, effective administration of criminal justice training and technical assistance grant funding, and for coronavirus emergency supplement funding. Ms. Lovell has been managing formula and discretionary grant programs for over 16 years. She first started administering grants for Maryland's state administrative agency with the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services as a grant specialist, where she managed over 150 grants for the state of Maryland and served as the senior law enforcement program manager. Our next participant is Mark Slater. Mr. Slater serves as a grants management specialist for the Bureau of Justice Assistance. In this role, he will manage and provide guidance in the administration of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant funding, and also for Connect to Protect law enforcement and behavioral health grant funding. Prior to joining BJA, he spent 13 years with the local Behavioral Health Authority of Baltimore City and led a team that managed a portfolio of grant funding supporting a variety of behavioral health services throughout the city. Mr. Slater has extensive experience in developing and managing criminal justice and behavioral health collaboration projects, including crisis intervention training, CIT, law enforcement assisted diversion lead programs, co-responder teams, and 911 diversion. He has also had over 10 years of direct experience in the behavioral health field in a variety of settings, including assertive community treatment, case management, and outpatient mental health services. We're also pleased to welcome Ernest Stevens, who is a Deputy Division Director in the Behavioral Health Division at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Mr. Stevens oversees the portfolio of work focused on improving outcomes for people experiencing behavioral health conditions and homelessness who encounter law enforcement. He supports communities in adopting, implementing, and evaluating new practices. Previously, Ernie spent over 28 years in law enforcement helping develop new programs and policies for the San Antonio Police Department. He also worked as a program manager for the Southwest Texas Regional Advisory Council that oversees emergency operations for 22 counties in Texas. Ernie was featured in the Emmy Award-winning documentary, Ernie and Joe, Crisis Cops. He also wrote Mental Health and De-escalation, a guide for law enforcement professionals. He earned his Bachelor's of Science degree in criminal justice from Wayland Baptist University. We're also pleased to welcome Sarah Wurzburg, who's a Deputy Division Director also in the Behavioral Health Division at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. She oversees technical assistance focused on behavioral health, diversion, reentry, and serves as the lead for projects related to substance use, mental illnesses, and housing through the work in our federal portfolio of grantees, including the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, Connect to Protect, and Second Chance Act. Ms. Wurzburg leads the work on the development of community responder programs, including a toolkit that supports sites in development of expanding first response options to people in crisis. Previously, Ms. Wurzburg was a research analyst at the National Association of State Alcohol and Drug Abuse Directors and also worked as a juvenile court advocate and in community substance use disorder prevention. I want to thank our entire panel for joining us today. We're really looking forward to learning more about this new funding opportunity. Next slide. So to give you a sense of what we're going to cover during today's webinar, first there's going to be an overview of the Connect and Protect program. After that, we'll discuss the more specifics, including the award information, budget, application criteria, followed by submission requirements. And BJ will also provide you with a variety of application resources. Finally, towards the end of the webinar, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. And just a little bit of housekeeping, anytime during the webinar, you can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and entering your question. This includes both technical and content-related questions. We will try to reply to technical questions in the chat window as we go. For the content-related questions, we're also going to try to respond to as many as we can throughout the webinar. And we will also have time to address more at the end during the Q&A period. We will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you encounter any technical or audio problems during this webinar, please click on the links that we've now dropped in the chat box. Please understand that there are some technical issues that we may not be able to resolve, but we will certainly try our best to assist you. And as a reminder to everyone, we are recording this webinar and we will post it along with the slides on the Council State Government's Justice Center website, in the next week or so. Next slide. So next, I will turn it over to Dr. Mount to tell us more about the Office of Justice Programs and the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Thank you so much, Allison. I also want to thank all of you today for joining us. The Connect and Protect program is an incredibly broad funding opportunity that supports communities in numerous ways. My goal is that you leave here today with the knowledge about the program and resources available to assist in submitting an application if you are interested. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the Bureau of Justice Assistance first. BJA is located within the Office of Justice Programs, or as you may know it, OJP. OJP provides a wide range of services to the criminal justice community in the form of grants, training, technical assistance, and research. OJP is actually one of 3 grant-making components of the Department of Justice, along with the Office on Violence Against Women and the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. If you are interested in learning more about all of our planned funding opportunities for FY24, please visit ojp.gov and click on the OJP program plan box, and this will take you to an interactive tool to help you find potential funding opportunities from all of DOJ's grant-making components. Next slide, please. This year, BJA will be celebrating our 40th anniversary. We were created in 1984 to reduce violent crime, create safer communities, and reform our nation's criminal justice system. Our current director, Carlton Moore, was appointed by President Biden in February of 2022. Next slide, please. Our work really focuses on providing funding through programs like Connect and Protect, transferring knowledge through training and technical assistance, developing guidance and resources, and engaging with partners and stakeholders all across the country. Next slide, please. Grantee teams who receive Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Awards will be supported throughout the active grant cycle by the BJA Policy and Programs Office, as well as the Council of State Governments Justice Center's technical assistance providers. I'm now going to pass it briefly back over to Allison, who's going to talk a little bit more about CSG.
Thanks, Brooke. Next slide. I'm just going to briefly give some background on the Council of State Governments Justice Center. The Justice Center is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that combines the power of a membership association representing state officials in all 3 branches of government with the expertise of a policy and research team focused on assisting others to attain measurable results. Our staff develops research-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. Also, we currently are the training and technical assistance provider to all active Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program and Connect and Protect Program grantees. Next slide. So this slide describes just a bit more about our work style and how we strive to reflect Justice Center core values, which include a commitment to being independent and nonpartisan in every aspect of our work, providing rigorous, trusted, high-quality analysis, developing practical and innovative solutions that are informed by data and research, promoting collaboration and building consensus, and being inclusive and respectful of diverse views and experiences. Next slide. Now, I want to just formally welcome all of you in the audience. We really appreciate your attendance today, and we'd love to, we have a quick polling question we'd like to ask you about. We'd love to get a sense of your prior experience with federal grants. So if you could just please take a moment to respond to the poll question you're seeing on your screens. We'll give it a minute to tabulate. Okay. Getting there. Wow, very interesting. So I think you all can see that we have, wow, almost 60% of our audience has had prior experience with federal grants. So that is a very high percentage. We're glad that you're back to consider applying again, and also welcome to all the organizations who have some or maybe no experience with federal grants. We're really glad you also joined in today. And we hope you will ask questions and learn a lot today and consider applying for this funding opportunity. Thank you very much for joining us. So next slide, I will turn it back over to Brooke to talk in more detail about the Connect and Protect program.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So OJP is committed to advancing work that promotes civil rights and equity, increase access to justice, support crime victims and individuals impacted by the justice system, strengthen community safety, protect the public from crime and evolving threats, and build trust between law enforcement and the community. Next slide, please. With this particular solicitation, BJA is seeking applications for the Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Response Program, or just for short, Connect and Protect. This program supports law enforcement and behavioral health cross-system collaboration to improve public health and public safety by improving responses to and outcomes for individuals with mental health disorders or co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders. BJA provides grant funding to help entities prepare, create, or even expand comprehensive plans, and then implement these collaborative projects to target people who qualify. This program furthers the Department of Justice's mission to uphold the rule of law, to keep our country safe, and protect civil rights. Next slide, please. We are anticipating in making an anticipated number of awards totaling 19, with a total dollar amount per award of $550,000 each. The period of performance start date is expected to be October 1st, 2024, for a duration of 36 months. Applicants that are planning a program for shorter than 36 months must indicate the period of performance in their abstract with a corresponding budget. Next slide, please. Now, this program is designed to support law enforcement and behavioral health collaboration, and that is key to this particular program. Therefore, a competitive application must include a partnership between a law enforcement and a mental health agency. For purposes of this FY24 solicitation, the definition of someone with a mental health disorder does include individuals with traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. Like other mental health disorders, TBIs and PTSD are chronic diseases that may cause cognitive and psychological impairment. Next slide, please. Please note that the Connect and Protect program is under the umbrella of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, also known as JMHCP. Therefore, per the authorizing statute, JMHCP requires a two-phase process consisting of planning and then implementation activities, during which grantees will develop a coordinated approach to implementing or enhancing services for individuals with mental health disorders or mental health and substance use disorders who come into contact with law enforcement. Applicants must submit one application that proposes detailed activities for both a planning phase and an implementation phase. To learn more about building comprehensive response systems, please see the link that was just provided in the chat for Police and Mental Health Collaborations, a framework for implementing effective law enforcement responses for people who have mental health needs. Next slide, please. The goal of the Connect and Protect program is to improve law enforcement and mental health collaboration in order to improve responses to and outcomes for individuals with mental health disorders, co-occurring disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities who come into contact with law enforcement. Again, I would like to emphasize that competitive applications must demonstrate this partnership between law enforcement and a mental health agency. Next slide, please. The Connect and Protect program offers grants to eligible entities to plan, implement, or expand comprehensive collaborative response initiatives that target preliminarily qualified individuals with mental health disorders or mental health and substance use disorders and promote improved public health and public safety. The term preliminarily qualified offender is outlined in the 21st Century Cures Act. It is very important to go directly to the reference code in the slide that was also just put in the chat to read the definition in its entirety. In general, a preliminarily qualified offender means an individual accused of an offense who previously or currently has been diagnosed by a qualified mental health professional as having a mental illness or co-occurring mental illness and substance abuse disorder, manifests obvious signs of mental illness or co-occurring mental illness and substance abuse disorders during arrest or confinement or before any court, and has been unanimously approved for participation in a program funded under this section by the relevant prosecuting or defense attorney, probation or corrections official, judge, and a representative from the relevant mental health agency. The adult must not pose a risk of violence to any person in the program or the public if selected to participate in the program, and has not been charged with or convicted of any sex offense or any offense relating to the sexual exploitation of children or murder or assault with intent to commit murder. Again, please be sure to go to the link and read the code in detail. Next slide, please. When applying, an applicant should include objectives to accomplish its goals. Objectives must be specific, measurable actions to reach the project's desired results. The included timelines should be clearly linked to our goal. BJA will make site-based awards for grantees to pursue the following objectives. Design and implement a crisis response program based on current best practice to assist law enforcement officers to improve encounters with individuals who have mental health disorders or co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders. This could include any of the following: crisis intervention teams or co-responder teams, law enforcement-based case management services, law enforcement assisted diversion, mobile crisis teams, crisis resolution and home treatment teams, EMS and ambulance responses. Community responder programs are eligible if the program is a partnership between a justice entity and mental health as applicants, and the community responder program is responding to a target population that is in behavioral health crisis for an alleged offense. Justice system partners need to be a part of the community responder effort. To learn more, please visit the Taking the Call website, which includes resources from a national conference exploring innovative community responder models. This particular website is located directly in the solicitation that is posted if you would like to visit for more information. Next slide. Thank you. Additional objectives that BJA will also consider include planning and delivering a crisis response program through coordination between law enforcement and a mental health agency that includes services to improve or enhance that response, enhance officer knowledge and skills in responding to community members with mental health disorders or co-occurring disorders, staff and train qualified staff to design and implement a police mental health collaboration program. Note that salaries and overtime costs to ensure training and coordination activities occur are allowable expenses. Engage residents through outreach and education to improve public health and public safety, build positive community relations and trust through public communication strategies, connect with BJA's 14 law enforcement mental health learning sites to learn and then incorporate and build upon successful PMHC strategies. Next slide, please. And finally, additional objectives will also be considered include to enhance knowledge and capacity to identify and provide veteran-specific services. This can include increasing stakeholder involvement in veteran response and treatment teams, including veteran peers with service connection experience to respond to veterans in crisis, and should enhance community responder capacity and increase available resources. Plan for multidisciplinary stakeholder teams to support police officers and mental health crisis workers responding together to mental health calls through strategic planning initiatives at the state, tribal, and local levels. Increase multi-layered approaches such as case management and corresponders to meet the needs of people in crisis, homeless outreach teams, mobile crisis, and co-response. Upgrade the use of technology to include software programs, training, and data collection to support the ability to count calls for service involving people with behavioral health needs. And increase public safety and public health agencies' capacity to develop and sustain the program by collecting data to inform practices, create stakeholder groups, develop policy, and encourage ongoing professional development. Next slide, please. Now, project deliverables refer to outputs, tangible or intangible outputs, for example, a report or a website, or greater feelings of safety reported by the community that are documented and submitted within the scope of a project. Program objectives and deliverables should be included on one timeline. Per the authorizing statute, Connect and Protect requires a two-phase process consisting of planning and then implementation activities, during which grantees will develop a coordinated approach to implementing or enhancing services for individuals who come into contact with the criminal justice system. Applicants must submit one application that proposes detailed activities for both a planning and implementation phase. During the first year, once an award is made, the grant recipients will receive intensive training and technical assistance, or TTA, from the Council of State Governments Justice Center to develop a planning and implementation guide. The planning phase will be up to 12 months, during which the recipient will have access to only $100,000 in award funds for completion of this phase. The implementation phase will begin once the grantee has met the requirements of the planning phase, to include the recipient's completion and BJA's approval of the required P&I guide, and it will continue for the remaining time of the grant. Applicants must also demonstrate at the same time of the P&I guide submission that at least one law enforcement agency and one mental health agency will participate in the administration of the program through established roles and responsibilities described in an attached memorandum of understanding. And we will be getting into more detail about the MOU in a couple of slides. Next slide, please. In addition to the P&I guide that is required by statute, additional deliverables and activities of the Connect and Protect program include the following. Document the approach for implementing or enhancing law enforcement behavioral health responses to individuals with mental health disorders or co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders who come into contact with law enforcement. Collect data on the program's outcomes, effectiveness, and challenges, and develop a report to share with fellow grantees. Conduct an evaluation of the PMHC and community satisfaction and create a report on the survey results. Develop common metrics and processes for tracking calls. Incorporate training and technical assistance as well as information and best practice guidance using BJA's training and technical assistance provider, and incorporate that into the planning and implementation guide. Outline and submit a plan at closeout for obtaining the necessary support to sustain and continue the proposed collaboration program following the conclusion of federal support. Next slide, please. To further OJP's mission, OJP will provide priority consideration when making award decisions to the following. Priority Area 1A includes applications that propose projects that are designed to meaningfully advance equity and remove barriers to accessing services and opportunities for communities that have been historically underserved, marginalized, adversely affected by inequality, and disproportionately impacted by crime, violence, and victimization. To receive this consideration, the applicant must describe how the proposed project will address identified inequities and contribute to greater access to services and opportunities for communities that have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by inequality and disproportionately impacted by crime, violence, and victimization. Project activities under this consideration may include, but are not limited to, the following: improving victim services, justice responses, prevention initiatives, reentry services, and other parts of an organization's or community's efforts to advance public safety. Applicants should propose activities that address the cultural and linguistic, if appropriate, needs of communities, outline how the proposed activities will be informed by these communities, and implement culturally responsive and inclusive outreach and engagement. Next slide, please. Applications that demonstrate that their capabilities and competencies for implementing the proposed projects are enhanced because they, or at least one proposed subrecipient that will receive at least 40% of the requested award funding, as demonstrated in the budget web-based form, are a population-specific organization that serves communities that have been historically underserved, marginalized, adversely affected by inequality, and disproportionately impacted by crime, violence, and victimization. For purposes of this solicitation, population-specific organizations meeting Priority B are nonprofit, non-governmental, or tribal organizations that primarily serve members of a specific underserved population and have demonstrated experience and expertise providing targeted services to members of that underserved population. To receive additional priority consideration for 1B, applicants must describe how being a population-specific organization or funding the population-specific subrecipient organizations will enhance their ability to implement the proposed projects, and should also specify which historically underserved populations are intended or expected to be served or have their needs addressed under the proposed projects. Next slide, please. In addition to executing any OJP priority areas that were previously mentioned, priority 1A or 1B, the programmatic priority areas for consideration also include promoting effective strategies by law enforcement to identify and reduce the risk of harm to individuals with mental health disorders or co-occurring mental health and substance use disorders who encounter law enforcement and improve public safety. Promoting effective strategies for the identification and treatment of females who have been incarcerated with mental health disorders or co-occurring disorders. Propose interventions that have been shown by empirical evidence to reduce recidivism, and when appropriate, use validated assessment tools to target people who have been incarcerated with a moderate or high risk of recidivism and a need for treatment services. Next slide, please. To receive priority consideration under any of these areas, applicants must identify in the proposal abstract each area for which priority consideration is being sought, and then describe in the proposal narrative how they will address each priority. It is important to note that addressing these priority areas is one of many factors that OJP considers in making funding decisions. Receiving priority consideration for one or more priority areas does not guarantee an award. I'm now going to pass it along to our programs office, where Tammy is going to discuss some budget and associated documentation. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Brooke. So regarding the budget and associated documentation, applicants should structure their budgets to allocate up to $100,000 to complete the planning phase within the first 12 months of receiving final OJP approval of the program's budget. The applicant needs to clearly identify which budget items are going to be for planning costs. Although applicants will be required to submit a budget for the entire 36-month program at the time of submission, they may revise their budgets based on any outcomes resulting from the planning phase. Next slide. Now we're going to speak a little bit about data collection, which is the plan for collecting data required for the solicitation's performance measures. You should describe the process for measuring your project performance. Also identify who's going to collect the data, who's responsible for performance measurements, and how the information will be used, and evaluate the project's impact. It should also be noted that the performance data directly relates to the solicitation goals and objectives identified in the goals and objectives section, which can be found at the link that will be dropped in the chat. Next slide. Applicants, once again, are not required to submit performance data with the application, but rather the performance and measure information is included to provide notice that award recipients will be required to submit performance data at part of each of awards report as part of the awards reporting requirements. Excuse me. OJP will require award recipients to regularly submit their performance data to show completed work results. BJA will require award recipients to submit their measurements, their performance measurement data and performance reports in Just Grants. They will provide further guidance for this during the post-award submission process if the applicants are selected for an award. It should be noted that project evaluations, an applicant that proposes to use funds through the solicitation to conduct any kind of project evaluations must follow the guidance in the Note on Project Evaluations section in the application review guide, the application resource guide. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the match requirement for this type of award. This funding opportunity requires an escalating cash match or in-kind match. Match is defined as means the portion of the project's cost not paid by federal funds or contributions, unless otherwise authorized by federal statute. The match for years 1 and 2 is 20%, and then for year 3, it escalates to 40%. Federal funds awarded under this funding opportunity may not cover more than 80% in years 1 and 2, and not more than 60% in year 3 of the total cost of the project being funded. An applicant must identify the source of the 20% and 40% non-federal portion of the total project cost and how they will use those match funds. If an award recipient's proposed match exceeds the required match amount according to the formula below, and OJP approves the budget, the total match amount in the approved budget becomes part of the project budget and is subject to audit. Match funds may be used only for the purposes that will be allowable for federal funds. This means neither federal funds nor matching funds may be used for costs considered inappropriate by the awarding agency, such as lobbying, land acquisition, or fundraising. Next slide. The grant-making component will waive any requirement for matching funds, including in-kind, under $200,000 for all awards made to American Samoa, Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Northern Mariana Islands, unless otherwise required by law to be provided, and may waive any requirement for matching funds equal to or over $200,000 for all awards made to those territories or to the trust territory of the Pacific Islands. The $200,000 amount is determined on a grant-by-grant basis, not by the aggregate total of all matching requirements applicable to the insular area. Next slide. I wanted to go over some resources that we have made available to all of our applicants. So if you could just make note of the next few slides, there's going to be some important resources. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. We're going to hand it back over to Brooke.
Thank you, Tammy. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about eligibility requirements. Eligible applications for Connect and Protect include state governments, special district governments, city or township governments, public and state-controlled institutions of higher education, county governments, and Native American tribal governments federally recognized. Agencies with a different legal status, such as a nonprofit or for-profit mental health agency, are eligible to apply as other, only if they meet two requirements. One, the applicant is designated by the state mental health authority to provide services as a unit of the state or local government. And two, the applicant must attach documentation to support this designation. If an application does not include the required documentation, it will not proceed to peer review and will not receive any further consideration. Please visit the Directory of State Mental Health Authorities on SAMHSA's website, and the link will be provided in the chat to contact your state authority and check on your agency's designation. BJA will also consider applications under which two or more entities or project partners would carry out the federal award. However, only one entity may be the applicant for the solicitation. Any others must be proposed as subrecipients or subgrantees. Next slide, please. An application should include a proposal abstract in Just Grants, a proposal narrative in Just Grants, a budget web-based form which includes the budget details and the budget narrative in Just Grants, an SF424 and SFLLL in grants.gov, financial management and system of internal controls questionnaire, including applicant disclosures of high-risk status in Just Grants, and a memorandum of understanding between a law enforcement agency and a mental health agency to demonstrate that required partnership or collaboration. Again, those entities that are applying as other mental health agencies must also attach documentation to support their designation as a state or local government provider. The applicant will submit the project's goals, objectives, deliverables, and timeline in the Just Grants web-based form. This is a summary of the goals, objectives, and deliverables and timeline that relate to the proposal narrative. The applicant will also enter the projected fiscal year and quarter that each objective and deliverable will be completed. Next slide, please. Now, applicants should include as a basic minimum requirement a memorandum of understanding to demonstrate partnership between a criminal justice entity and a mental health service provider as partnering organizations. Now, please note that the MOU can be submitted in outline form and does not have to be signed at the time of your application. However, a finalized copy will be due within the first year of your grant if it is awarded. Additional letters that outline subcontract commitments of staff time, space, services, or other project needs, although important during the planning phase, are not a basic minimum requirement at the time of application. Again, the basic minimum requirement at the time of application does include at least a draft of an MOU. Now, we do receive a lot of questions regarding what is the definition of a criminal justice agency and a mental health agency. A criminal justice agency is an agency of state or local government or its contracted agency that is responsible for the detection, arrest, enforcement, prosecution, defense, adjudication, incarceration, probation, or parole relating to the violation of criminal laws of that state or local government. And the definition of a mental health agency is defined as an agency of the state or local government or its contracted agency that is responsible for mental health services or co-occurring mental health and substance use services. The contracted agency must be a designated agency for the state and acting on behalf of the state through that specific designation. And again, if you'd like to check on your mental health agency's designation, please click on the SAMHSA link that was provided in the chat to reach out to your state official. Next slide, please. Applications that meet the basic minimum requirements will then be evaluated by peer reviewers on how the proposed project or program addresses the following criteria. The first is the description of the issue, comprised of 15%, in which we're evaluating the applicant's understanding of the program issue to be addressed. The second is the project design and implementation, which comprises 40%. Which is an evaluation of the strength of the proposal, including information provided in the goals, objectives, timelines, and deliverables web-based form. The third criteria are the capabilities and competencies, which comprise 30%, in which we evaluate the applicant's administrative and technical capacity to successfully accomplish the goals and objectives. The fourth criteria is the plan for collecting the data required for the solicitation's performance measures, which is 5%, which is an evaluation of the applicant's understanding of the performance data reporting requirements and the plan for collecting the required data. And finally, the budget is comprised of 10%, in which there will be an evaluation for completeness, cost effectiveness, and allowability, including reasonable, allowable, and necessary for project activities. Other important considerations for OJP review criteria include geographic diversity, strategic priorities, specifically including but not limited to those priority areas already mentioned, available funding, past performance, and the extent to which the budget web-based form accurately explains project costs that are reasonable, necessary, and otherwise allowable under federal law and applicable federal cost principles. Costs are allowable when they are reasonable and necessary for the performance of the federal award, and when they comply with the funding statute and agency requirements to include the conditions of the award, including the cost principles set out in the solicitation. Next slide, please. Now, how to apply. Before submitting an application, it's very important that all applicants must register with the System for Award Management, or SAM.gov. An applicant must renew their registration every 12 months, and if an applicant does not renew their SAM.gov registration, it will expire. An expired registration can delay or prevent application submission in grants.gov and Just Grants. So applicants are encouraged to start the SAM.gov registration process at least 30 days prior to the application deadlines. Applicants who fail to begin the registration or renewal process at least 10 days prior to the grants.gov deadline may not complete their process in time and will not be considered for late submission. Applications must be submitted to DOJ electronically through a two-step process that begins in grants.gov and is completed in Just Grants. Step 1 is after registering with SAM.gov, the applicant must submit the SF424 and SFLLL in grants.gov by the deadline. To leave time to address any technical issues that may arise, an applicant should submit those forms as early as possible, and it's recommended not later than 48 hours before the grants.gov deadline. If an applicant fails to submit in grants.gov by the deadline, they will be unable to apply in Just Grants. Applicants can confirm Grants.gov submission by verifying their application status shows as submitted or agency tracking number assigned. Step 2, the applicant must then submit the full application, including attachments in Just Grants by the deadline. Next slide, please. Again, OJP recommends the applicants submit the completed application package at least 48 hours prior to the Just Grants deadline. Some of the required sections of the application will be directly entered into Just Grants, and other sections may require documents to be uploaded and attached. Therefore, applicants should allow enough time before the Just Grants deadline to prepare all of those requirements for the application. Applicants can save their progress in the system and add to it or change their application as needed prior to hitting submit at the end of the application in Just Grants. An applicant will receive emails when successfully submitting in grants.gov and Just Grants, and should maintain all emails and other confirmation received from the systems. Next slide, please. Now, I want to highlight some very important dates to note. The SF424 and the SFLLL must be submitted in grants.gov by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on May 1st, 2024. And the full application must be submitted in Just Grants by 8:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, May 6th, 2024. To be considered timely, the full application must be submitted in Just Grants by that deadline. Failure to begin the SAM.gov, grants.gov, or Just Grants registration and application process in sufficient time, such as waiting until the due dates identified in the solicitation for those systems to begin the application steps, is not an acceptable reason to request a technical waiver. OJP will only consider requests to submit an application after the deadline when the applicant can document that a technical issue with a government system prevented submission of the application on time. And if an applicant misses a deadline due to unforeseen technical issues with SAM.gov, grants.gov, or Just Grants, the applicant may request a waiver to submit an application after the deadline. However, the waiver request will not be considered unless it includes documentation of attempts to receive technical assistance to resolve the issue prior to the application deadline. A tracking number is the most typical documentation and is generated when the applicant contacts the applicable service desk to report the technical difficulties. Tracking numbers are automatically generated when the applicant emails the applicable service desk, and for this reason, long call wait times for support do not relieve the applicant of the responsibility of getting a tracking number. OJP will review each waiver request and the required supporting documentation and notify the applicant whether the request for late submission has been approved or denied. An applicant that does not provide documentation of a technical issue, including all of the information just described, or that does not submit a waiver request within the required time period will be denied. I will now turn it back over to Tammy, who's going to discuss application resources that may be of interest to you.
Thank you, Brooke. Next slide. Some of the resources I wanted to highlight on this page. This is from the OJP Grant Application Resource Guide, which is a great resource when you are developing your application. It includes links to how to apply, the different elements that need to be included in your application, such as the narrative, the abstract, the budget, financial information, application review information, and other pertinent information when developing your application. Next slide. And I wanted to point out the links on this page as far as the Just Grants system. This is where you can find information about Just Grants and the payment management systems, information on login, Just Grants login, trainings that we offered, frequently asked questions, user support for Just Grants, and various resources can be found at the links on this page. And I also wanted to note on the bottom left, you can register now. March dates added for virtual question and answer sessions, as well as updated Just Grants frequently asked questions. Next slide. And once again, to piggyback off of what Brooke was saying about the different systems that you need to apply in, grants.gov, if you have any issues with submitting your SF424 or your SFLLL, please note that the customer service support hotline, 800-518-4726, and they operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, except on federal holidays. And below you can find their web address as well as their support email address. Additionally, for technical assistance with Just Grants, please note their number, 833-872-5175, and that is available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and Saturday and Sunday and federal holidays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And below is their support email and their web address. Next slide. And I wanted to point out this slide. This is a Stay Connected. These are various links to newsletters, funding news, OJP email newsletter that you can sign up for at the following links on this page. Next slide. And furthermore, BJA as well as OJP is on Facebook, X, YouTube, and then we've listed incorporated into this slide a QR code that you can conveniently click on to access any of these systems to receive updates and news from BJA. And then I also encourage you to visit our website at www.bja.ojp.gov. Next slide. And just for additional questions, I encourage you to contact via email or phone any questions you have that we have not answered in today's webinar to the OJP Response Center. Their email is listed on the slide, and their toll-free number is 800-851-3420. And I wanted to point out their hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Next slide. And this is a general reminder that there are dual deadlines for your application. It is a two-step process, each with its own separate deadline. Step one, again, to submit your SF424 and your SFLLL through grants.gov. Step two is where you will submit your full application with all attachments to justgrants.usdoj.gov. And please note the submission the submission deadline times for both grants.gov and Just Grants are now 8:59 p.m. Eastern Time and not 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time as it was in past years. Please be sure to refer to the solicitation and read carefully for further guidance. Next slide. And finally, I wanted to go over a quick reference and important contacts once again for grants.gov and Just Grants. Listed on the screen are the phone numbers and email support for both agencies, and as well as OJP Resource Center. The phone number and email is listed in this slide again. I'm now going to hand it back over to Allison.
Thanks so much, Tammy and Brooke. So now we're going to shift into the Q&A, question and answer portion of the webinar. And just as a couple of reminders, first of all, this webinar is being recorded, and we are going to be posting the webinar recording along with the slides on our csgjusticecenter.org website in about a week or so. So you will have access to all these materials. And just a reminder now, we're going to try to respond to as many questions as possible in the time remaining. You can enter questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and entering your question. We do have a lot of questions today, so we're going to try to get to as many as possible. We may not get to them all, so I just want to remind folks that we have included in the chat the OJP Response Center and all their contact information by email, phone, and their hours of operation. And if we do not get to your question today, please remember your question and pose it to the OJP Response Center. They will be able to provide you with an answer, but we'll get through as many as we can. This year, for the first time, we had, oh, sorry, I didn't realize my video. This year, for the first time, we had the opportunity for people to ask questions in advance, which was really exciting. So we thank those of you who provided questions in advance of the webinar today. So we're going to start with answering a couple of those questions, and then we'll go to the live questions. So to start with, there's been a lot of live questions today too on the same topic. If a jurisdiction or an applicant has a current active award, are they eligible to apply for a new fiscal year 24 award?
Yes, you can apply.
Great. And a second advanced question was, the solicitation, the Connect and Protect solicitation states that BJA encourages agencies to apply that have not previously received BJA funding. Does that mean that we would be excluded from applying if we are currently administering a BJA grant?
No, BJA always encourages applications from eligible entities that have not previously been awarded funds. This is a competitive solicitation, and all applicants are encouraged to review the merit review section in the solicitation for more information on how applications are evaluated.
Great, thank you, Brooke. And then the last advanced question that we're going to get to today is an applicant is asking to verify that a school district is eligible to apply for the fiscal year 24 Connect and Protect Law Enforcement Behavioral Health Response Grant. If so, can the grant help pay for a school resource officer and a school mental health counselor who will work together to address safety and mental health issues throughout the district?
Please refer to the eligibility criteria on page 4 of this solicitation and the eligibility information section on page 10. And if you are not able to obtain the response that you require, I would recommend that you reach out to the OJP response desk.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brooke. Okay, next we have a couple of questions. Oh, and I also just want to say for the folks that submitted advanced questions, thank you again. And you will also be getting an individualized response by email from the response center as well. So you have that information in your email too, very, very soon. Okay, so we have a couple of match related questions. So Tammy, maybe this is going to come your way, I think. Sure. So the first question is asked, what happens if we overmatch?
So if a recipient or a subrecipient has included a match that exceeds the required matching portion within the approved budget, the records of those additional amounts must be included and maintained as if they are part of the regular match amount.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tammy. And another common question about matches that we see, can we roll over our match from year to year?
Match must be met at 20% for years 1 and 2 combined and 40% for year 3. The total match amount calculated must be met by project period end date.
Great, thanks, Tammy. And we'll turn over to more of the live questions now, and I have another match related question. So there's a question that says, can you please provide examples of previous in-kind matching or cost sharing, particularly for university-based researchers?
So an example of in-kind match would be if a university has an employee that is going to be conducting an the evaluation piece of the project or a portion of the evaluation piece, and they are donating their time, that would be in kind.
Great.
A
Thank you
certain
so
amount of hours worked per week, that's considered in kind.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Another, and I guess if further clarification is needed, again, please, after the webinar, contact the OJP Response Center for further clarification. We're getting a lot of questions on another theme, which is to apply for this grant, are applicants only exclusively needing to start a program from scratch, or can they also apply to enhance or expand an existing program? Assuming they meet all the other application criteria, eligibility criteria.
That's a great question. Funding can be used to expand a current program.
Great. So either, really, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Fantastic. There's a lot of questions here about whether school districts can apply for the grants, whether there can be youth focus on the Connect and Protect grant, or if not, when do we expect the OJJDP, maybe youth focused solicitations to be released?
Another great question. So for FY24, Connect and Protect is for adults only. However, you can visit our DOJ program plan by visiting ojp.gov. And if you click on the DOJ program plan, you can see all of the plan solicitation from all of our grant making authorities. OJJDP does have an FY24 planned solicitation for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program for the juvenile JMHCP. So I would highly recommend you sign up for alerts so you can obtain more information on when that comes out.
Fantastic. Okay, we have another sort of programmatic related question. Interesting, trying to figure out JMHCP versus Connect and Protect. So, oops, I think maybe that question.
I apologize.
Okay.
I blurbed that out, but that was a question that I just read. And the question was, what is the difference between Connect and Protect and JMHCP? Because they sound very similar. So Connect and Protect is actually under the umbrella of JMHCP, and we just kind of carved it out to specifically focus on law enforcement, whereas JMHCP is for all other criminal justice entities along the intercepts. So courts, probation, parole, pretrial, and things like that.
Great, thanks for the clarification. Okay, here's another match question. So Tammy, I'll call on you. For the match requirement, if our program gets money from our county's opiate settlement funds, are those considered federal dollars?
I am not sure if that is federal dollars or not. I recommend emailing that question to the OJP Response Center, and they will get back to you with, because I would need more information on that before I could answer that.
So maybe they should include a little bit more detail when they ask the question.
Yes,
great.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. This is about the planning phase. So we know that phase 1 is the planning phase. So this attendee is asking, does year 1, the planning phase, have to be the full 12 months? Can it be shorter if we have already started the planning process prior to getting funding? And if it can be shorter, can the $100,000 year 1 budget also be lessened?
So your planning phase can be completed prior to 1 year, so long as the planning and implementation guide is completed and approved by BJA. At that time, there would be a release for the rest of the funds.
Excellent, great.
Allison, just to add one more thing, the planning and
Yes.
implementation guide is going to be done in conjunction with the training and technical assistance provider as well. So there's
Yes.
support actually to complete it. So just want to make sure we share that.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. There's another similar question about can opioid settlement funds coming to a police department through the state be used for match? So I think, again, the similar, correct me if I'm wrong, Tammy, but similar response to please reach out to the response center and include a little more detail so that they can be able to
Exactly.
answer that question
Exactly.
for you. Okay. There is a lot of questions about matches. I'm trying to see if they are similar or not. In the meantime, let me ask a different question. So there's a question about, in light of the evaluation algorithm, how does priority consideration impact an applications consideration?
So there's a variety of factors that are considered during the peer review process, including those that were mentioned during the presentation, such as past performance and funds that are available. So I would highly recommend that you read that section in the solicitation to specifically learn more about all of the different factors that are considered and the criteria.
Great, thank you. Here's something of a budget question, but it involves maybe programmatic changes as well. So if your budget includes funds for consultants, can you reallocate those funds for other needs in the project if you don't use the full amount allocated?
Yes, yes, you can. However, if what you're reallocating those funds for is not something that is already in the approved BJA budget, a possible change of scope and budget modification will both be required. And at that time, I highly recommend that the grantee reach out to their grant manager at DOJ for further guidance.
Great, thank you. Here's an interesting question as well. How competitive is this grant? What percentage of applicants do you expect will be funded?
Great question. I don't know the anticipated number of applications that we are expected to receive this year. However, we are anticipating making 19 awards, and I'm not 100% accurate on last year's total because I'm only 6 months new with BJA, but I do believe there were approximately 40 or 50 applications submitted last year.
Great, thank you. We'll see what happens this year. So we encourage you to apply. Okay, there's been a few questions about staffing requirements for grant applications. Is it a requirement to have staffing as, for example, one full-time equivalent, at least one FTE at least to the project? Or is it possible to not have staffing on the budget and perhaps have services for clients and participants exclusively, or?
Sarah, I'm going to have you kind of explain this a bit, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think this really depends on the needs of the applicant. So it's hard to speak in vague terms. So maybe we can, provide an example. So some successful programs that have been funded in the past have provided some training for law enforcement officers. So let's say crisis intervention team training, and then they may also try to fund some connections to behavioral health services that people could do in the community if they can't pay for those services. And so maybe that would be less on funding a staff position within a police department or a mental health agency and more on services to clients and trainings, which could be a possibility. And other grantees might actually be funding people like an embedded clinician within a law enforcement agency or within their dispatch. So there's kind of a lot of different options. And I think it's really up to each grant team to figure out the needs and then find the right mix that works for you. The budget will be reviewed as part of the application, and that is part of what the team went over as well.
Thank you, Sarah. Just wanted to add again that there are no specific requirements regarding staff, and this is something that's determined by the applicant in alignment with their own proposed program.
Great, thank you to Brooke and Sarah. Okay, a bit more specific question about the topic of software development. And so an audience member is asking, is software development different from upgrading or purchasing new software?
So that is a great question. I would certainly advise you to reach out to the OJP help desk. However, specifically noted in the solicitation, the software use example is emphasizing to assist in data collection for calls for service. So there's no specific specifications regarding like development or upgrading or purchasing new software versus, does that software have a clear nexus or connection to supporting the program, specifically meeting the needs of individuals with mental health disorders and co-occurring disorders.
Great. So again, referring back to the nature and the needs of the program. Okay. Next question, is the COPS hiring program still active? And if so, when is it opening?
Please take a look at that DOJ program plan that I did reference. You'll be able to look at all of those planned solicitations and sign up for alerts. They all do start to kind of roll out at different times. Spring is certainly our most busy season, so please make sure that you check that out to ensure that it's not already available.
Great, thanks. Yeah, that's a great newsletter to join on to so you get all the alerts. Okay, our state, next question, getting back to a couple more match questions. Are state mental health block grant funds allowed to be used for the match?
So
Tammy, I
you
don't know.
cannot
Oh,
match. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
You
go
cannot.
ahead.
You cannot match these funds with other federal funds. And if you're using state funds as your match, it just depends on what those state funds are being allocated for. I recommend at the time that you reach out if you are awarded and you have questions about your match, that you reach out to your DOJ grant manager, or if you want to get a more definitive answer before you submit an application, then contact the OJP Resource Center. There's a lot of moving factors with that.
Great, so nuances. Thank you, Tammy. And one more match question, Tammy. To clarify, what you covered on the match during the presentation, this audience member is asking, is it 20% of year 1 and 2 combined, or 20% in year 1, 20% in year 2, then 40% in year 3?
No, it is, for clarification, it's 20% for years 1 and 2 combined, and then 40% for year 3.
Great, that's very clear. Thank you. This is a great question. Should an applicant meet with a BJA specialist to vet their idea and their program, or is this kind of assistance available?
Unfortunately, in order to ensure the competitive nature and to eliminate any kind of bias, we are not permitted to give any specific advice regarding your application in advance.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you give an example or examples of how this grant has been used successfully by alternative response programs, not co-response programs?
Sarah, are you able to provide any examples or direct someone to CSG's website to see successful examples?
Yeah, so I think there were some successful examples available on the website. So we'll provide jamiecheapy.org within the chat, but I think there's a lot of different types of programs that have been successfully funded. I believe that Brooke shared a couple of examples, co-response programs related to looking at 911 calls for service to try to make flags for mental illness or embed clinicians. programs that are looking to do case management related to people with mental illness or co-occurring substance use disorders have been successful applicants. So there's a lot of different options. We had some people indicating in the chat that they were sheriff's office, so either through patrol or within a facility is also potential options for what you could apply for. But if you go to jmhcp.org, Ernie just put that in the chat, there's additional information on the programs as well as the law enforcement mental health learning sites. So if you look at the types of programs, examples from the learning sites, any of those types of programs really would be eligible through this funding if you're trying to get innovative ideas.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. So I believe, Tammy, you may have answered this already, but just another match question, just to make sure. If an agency is awarded the max award of $550,000, what is the match funding requirement for the 3-year award period?
So once again, you have to, it depends on what they have for years 1 and 2, which is 20%, and then year 3 is 40%. I can't give an outright total because it depends on the totals that they have requested for federal funding for each specific year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And here's a unusual and interesting question. What is, the audience member asks, what is your #1 recommendation for someone stepping into the world of grant applications? That's a great question.
That is a great question. I would definitely recommend that you just go and check out all the resources that we're providing today, to include our Department of Justice grant application submission checklist, to check out the OJP grant application resource guide. Also go to the DOJ grants financial guide, and these were all included in today's presentation. But also something that can be very helpful is to go and check out on BJA's website. We have successful application examples, so you can see what worked for other people, and that can be used as a great source to kind of familiarize yourself with what those packets look like.
And to add a note to that, to also add to Brooke's comments on that, I think an extremely important piece of a successful application is to please read over the solicitation very carefully. I know they can be long and cumbersome, but it includes a great deal of useful information that can really help guide your application.
Yes. And one more thing that I forgot to mention, there is an incredible series on BJA's website titled the BJA 2024 Grant Applicant Education Series. And there are a series of videos there that you can review that help you walk through the process.
Well, yeah, that's a great resource. Okay. This may have been covered in the presentation, but just for the audience member who asked, there's a question about whether case management generally can be included as an activity in the Connect and Protect grant project. So I think that's a yes, but
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Allison, I think we have
Yeah.
time for just 1 or 2 more questions, and then
Yes.
we'll have to wrap up.
Yes. So there are a few questions left that are, again, asking, can we be eligible with this partnership? So I would say, based on what we've covered already, to really, again, contact the OJP Response Center with your question. Also use the SAMHSA website to see if your behavioral health partner is an eligible entity, so use those resources to help answer this question. And again, there's other match questions, but I think there are, as we heard from Tammy in the programs office, there are nuances there. And so I think you've got to include some more nuances, either try to ask it now with the OJP Response Center, or if you're awarded, then, when you have more information, you can clarify it then. There is one question here that I could try to ask. So it's from a police department. They say that they already have a thriving co-responder program and a lead program. They're interested in setting up a multidisciplinary threat assessment team to bring together all of their experts to discuss high-risk individuals who may be considering targeted violence or are causing major disruptions in the community. They want to create opportunities to intervene with these individuals and help provide them with mental health, physical health, and other services to improve their situation and reduce the risk of targeted violence. They're looking for seed money to start the program, but at this time, they don't plan on hiring anyone. So it seems like maybe the planning and, is this grant appropriate for that type of a project?
Certainly, I would say that it sounds like the utilization of funds to expand upon an existing program is certainly allowable under this program.
Great. Okay, and then a final question. Is there a way we can have access to the questions post-webinar as well? That's interesting. I know that we can have a record, we are able to have a recording of the questions. I don't know if it's in a form that we could send out to folks, but we could, if I could include my contact information here. I'll put it in the chat. And if people have a specific question that they want us to look back and try to get the framing of, I'd be happy to try to look that up for folks.
Allison, I have a much
Okay.
simpler solution.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I was going to say that all of these questions will be included in the webinar, and there will be a transcript available
yes.
of the webinar. So please, check out in a few days to, obtain a copy of this webinar. And if you don't want the actual video file, you can certainly obtain the transcript, which will have all of these questions and answers. If there are specific questions that have not already been addressed, please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out to the OJP help desk, and they will certainly address any questions that have not already been.
Great.
And I keep calling it the help desk, but it's the OJP Response Center.
Yes.
I just use it interchangeably in case I'm confusing some of you. I apologize. I'm just going to provide that information one more time so it's actually included in our transcript. So the OJP Response Center's email is grants@ncjrs.gov. And their phone number is 1-800-851-3420. And the TTY line for hearing impaired is 301-240-6310. Please note that their hours of operation are Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Great. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up. And again, if people have additional questions, as Brooke mentioned, please contact the OJP Response Center. We want to just thank all of our whole panel today and folks that pitched in to answer questions. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all that we learned today about this funding opportunity, and we really strongly encourage you to consider applying. And thanks to our audience. We had a great group of questions today. We appreciate it. And Brooke, do you want to say any words to wrap us up, or?
I just want to thank you all for attending today. We are certainly all very passionate about this program and look forward to seeing all of your applications come through. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us or the support that's available to assist you through this process. And good luck to everyone. And thank you again for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.